What's up guys, and welcome to this video. 4K is something we've talked about a lot. It's something that everyone is talking about every day. 4K, 4K, 4K. But there's one thing we haven't yet talked about, and that's 4K monitors. 4K monitors are probably actually the thing you're most interested in, and they're the thing that you already have plenty of 4K content, because everything you do on your computer, as long as you're using it in its native resolution, is going to be in that resolution. So they cost a little bit more money, but they're still a lot cheaper than going out and getting a 4K TV. So, should you buy a 4K monitor? Well, when you're looking at 4K monitors, it's probably actually a UHD, ultra high definition monitor. Now this is the same standard that is used in TVs, and it carries the resolution of 3840 by 2160. This means that it's 4 times the resolution of 1080p, which is quite easy to imagine. It's a lot sharper, and of course it is a lot sharper. And when you get it out of the box and you start looking at the screen, you realise how awesome it is and how you need to get really close to the screen to start being able to see any pixels, which mean everything is really clear, and as long as you're looking at something that is the proper resolution, so if you're looking at a photo that you've taken that's in a really high megapixel resolution, then it means that it looks super sharp, and it's actually never looked better. But there are a few issues with 4K monitors, as we will now discuss. Now the big thing here is optimization. Now I'll say that I've seen plenty of videos and heard loads of stuff about 4K monitors, and it wasn't until I saw one for the first time that I started to realise what the problems that people were talking about actually were. It's very easy to just go, well, it's 4 times the resolution, it's going to be so much better, go out and get one, and then you're going to start to realise that there are a few issues. But as long as you're aware of these issues, then you can make an informed decision. Now, if I was going to describe in one sentence what the problem with 4K monitors were, it would be this. 4K is not yet properly optimized from a software and hardware point of view to give yourself a great experience. Now, to expand on what I mean by that sentence a little bit is basically that there are so many small niggling problems that you get when running a 4K monitor, and the lack of optimization kind of means that it does detract from this super sharp experience into one that, yes, it's sharp, but it carries a lot of problems with it. Now the main problem that I have, and that a lot of people are having with a 4K monitor at the moment, is scaling. Now if you're running a 1080p monitor, chances are your scaler is on 100%, which means it's not actually doing anything at all. It's not making it bigger, and it's not making anything smaller. This means that everything on the screen is as intended, it's all the right size, brilliant. As soon as you start to use a bigger screen, you might want to reduce that, but as soon as you get a bigger screen with a larger resolution, it means that although stuff is going to be slightly bigger if it was 1080p, because it's a lot denser, everything is a lot smaller, so stuff is actually twice as small in both directions, which kind of makes it 4 times smaller, but it's still twice as smaller. Point is, everything becomes ridiculously small on a 4K screen. So small that it's completely unusable. So, how do we fix this? We scale it up. Stuff in Windows uses vectors, which means that as you grow them, the quality doesn't decrease. So it's just a simple case of upping the scaler, and then everything gets a little bit bigger, but it's still really sharp, stuff is the right size, brilliant. Except it's not. This is the thing. You can't get the scaler at the moment, at least on a 28-inch 4K monitor, in my opinion, to be a really usable, user-friendly size. Stuff is still either too big or too small. Factor that in with the fact that I run a multi-monitor setup, and one of these is a 1200p monitor, so basically a 1080p monitor. It means that stuff is still small on the 4K one and then ridiculously big on the other one. Windows 8 is slightly better in that you can scale displays separately, but it's still not quite intelligent enough to have stuff the same size, and it just means that it's become a lot less user-friendly for me to use 2 monitors at the same time. Which is a big shame, and it is something that a lot of people are just, like myself, are naturally assuming you can do without an issue. How to get around the problems of having a 4K monitor? Have a 4K monitor next to a normal monitor. Great. It's just such a shame it doesn't actually work like that. And that's just talking about the built-in Windows scaler. We haven't even got on to third-party applications. Now third-party applications, some of them will scale a little bit, but most of them will properly rely on having a good scaler built internally, so basically good code behind the scenes to make sure that it runs properly at a 4K resolution. And some of the stuff I've used has done that. I find that Adobe Lightroom is pretty good. I haven't had any issues with that. It's a great bit of software anyway, but it seems to scale really nicely and that is the best experience that I've had with the software. Everything is nice and sharp, everything is the right size, easy to use, brilliant. However, I was doing some mock-up designs in Adobe Fireworks and everything is tiny. And those are both stuff made by a massive software company. So if you imagine that you're going to be doing some sort of application that isn't quite as well known, slightly smaller dev team, they don't have the time to allocate scalars and things like that properly to their applications, or at least some of them don't anyway, which means that the applications are going to be really hard to use and you're just going to run into some problems. Now, I remember the first time I went up to an IPS monitor and literally everything was better. Nothing was worse. The experience was much better, nothing was worse. The problem with this is everything looks so much better, but at the same time everything becomes so much harder to use that it's kind of just like, why can't it just work? And it's something that if you get hold of a 4K monitor, you are no doubt going to run into these issues. But while scaling is the main issue for me, it is of course important to talk about performance, and performance will vary depending on what you're using it for. Photo editing, like I've already mentioned, has been a real breeze for me. Yes, it's having to load and cache slightly higher textures and things like that in the pictures, but that's not an issue if you have a decent high-end PC. And everything looks great because you've got a super sharp monitor and you're going to be getting the most out of it. As long as the application you're using is properly optimized, you're going to have a great experience. Move on to video editing, and it's going to vary a little bit more depending on the software again, but it's nice to be able to see a 1080p Full HD preview that's actually in 1080p HD. Great. Like I've said, some software, depending on what it is, isn't going to work properly, the scaling's not going to work properly, and you're just going to have icons that are too small, or stuff is going to be blurry, or stuff is going to be just scaled wrong and you won't be able to see anything. So that will vary, but the one area that really is affected badly in the performance area is gaming, and that is something that a lot of people are going to be quite excited about, 4K gaming. And I'm no stranger to 4K gaming. I've done a lot of 4K gaming on a 4K television, and now I've started to do a lot of 4K gaming on a 4K monitor. And while I would say that bigger is better, that doesn't really work when you want to use a mouse and keyboard. So 4K games, brilliant, except for the fact that it's 4 times the resolution and it's a lot more pixels to push. And it's very fair to say that if you have infinite money, you can get a great 4K experience. You just need to get some super high-end cards, bang 2 or 3 of them in SLI, brilliant. But that's not at all reasonable. You're paying a very large amount of money for a monitor in the first place, and if we look at the average gamer, they're not going to want to spend anywhere close to that amount of money to get a good 4K experience. So you're going to be running games at lower settings, or you're going to be lowering the resolution, and if you're doing that, then why bother getting a 4K monitor in the first place? So it's definitely something to think about if you want to get 4K gaming. Unfortunately, it's getting better every year, but it's still extortionately expensive. And even me running a GTX 980, just a single card, most games still aren't really that usable, even close to max settings at 4K. It will depend on the game. Dark Souls 2 is brilliant, run it at 4K, max settings, no problem whatsoever. Some older games, I'm working through Mass Effect, has a few issues, but you know, it's fine, brilliant. But as soon as you move on to a modern game, I've gone from 120Hz average, pretty much locked at frame rate in Battlefield 4 on a 1080p monitor. Brilliant, super smooth, really easy to play, have great fun. Move over to a 4K monitor, same settings, about 35 to 40 average FPS, and which to me is verging on pretty much unplayable. So in order for me to get a decent level of detail while retaining a 60 FPS minimum frame rate, I basically needed to knock it down to close to 1440p anyway. And again, what's the point of doing all of that if you've got a 4K monitor? If you just want to do 4K gaming, it's probably worth waiting a little bit longer until the monitors are a little bit cheaper and the graphics cards are also that little bit cheaper, or of course more powerful. A lot of people will of course want to use 4K video on the machine, and yes, if you get hold of some, it looks great. You can download some 4K trailers and stuff like that, brilliant. But due to like copyright protection, Netflix isn't coming to computers anytime soon, so the only way to get 4K content through Netflix is on a television. And while YouTube 4K is great, it can look amazing, I have found that even on an i7 powerful machine, it still doesn't work as well as it should do. And not just loading issues, of course. I've got super fast internet, doesn't always load properly, but it doesn't always play back properly as well. Sometimes it's kind of doing that a little bit, which is a shame. When you think you've got a powerful machine, you'd be able to run it, but clearly there's just a few software issues that need to be ironed out. But we're going in the right place. But I guess that's how I would sum up and conclude this video, really. 4K monitors and the software and the hardware that power them are getting there, but they're not there yet. So that's not to say you can't get a good 4K experience with a 4K monitor, but I'm not gonna lie, I've got this 4K monitor in at the moment just for a couple of weeks to review, and you can find that review coming up very shortly on the channel, so subscribe if you haven't already. But I'm certainly not going to be crying about it when I disconnect it and plug my old 1080p 120Hz one back in, just because it's kind of made me realise that it's not quite ready for it, and unless you've got a stupid amount of power and it's a dedicated gaming PC or a dedicated photo editing PC, I think you're going to run into too many issues and you're just going to be a little bit unhappy. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the video. Yes, 4K monitors are sharp, games look awesome, video looks awesome, everything when it works is awesome, but you're going to run into a lot of issues, which means that your experience might not actually be that awesome after all. So think very carefully before you go out and buy a 4K monitor, because the last thing you want to do is regret your decision. If you're asking me at the moment, what should you do? Well, I can't tell you exactly what you should do, but I'm looking to get a 1440p 144 120Hz monitor as my next upgrade, because I think that is kind of the best of both worlds. But of course, it will vary depending on what you want to do with it. So thank you for watching this video. I hope it hasn't been too ranty, I hope it's given you some good information, and I hope you're going to make a more informed decision about 4K monitors. If you've already got a 4K monitor, or if you don't want a 4K monitor or anything like that, then of course start a discussion in the comments section below. If you have any questions, then as always tweet me with the hashtag AskPCCentric, and then I'll get back to you pretty much immediately. My phone goes off, oh look, he's sent me a tweet, I reply. Brilliant. And of course subscribe to PC Centric for more videos like this as well as others, and of course for this 4K Philips monitor review coming up in the next few days, as well as a load of other monitor reviews that are coming up pretty shortly. And there's not much else to say other than like the video if you thought it was great, and dislike it if you thought it was a waste of your time. Basically I wanted to say goodbye, couldn't do it in a better way. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.